Welcome back to the HubScale podcast. Today we have Tony D'Angelo, a longtime federal, public sector, and enterprise leader. Tony, it's great to have you on.
Elliot, thanks for having me. Good to be with you today.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming on. And so I guess just giving a quick introduction to yourself to the listeners, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. I've been in the IT industry over 30 years now. Most of my career is being based in Washington. Most of my career has been focused on U.S. federal, but I've also done quite a bit with in general U.S. public sector. So that includes the state and local education market as well, healthcare, and I've even in various roles had commercial enterprise roll up to me as well. So and even a little bit of carrier. So I've been able to kind of round out my career with a lot of different elements of in terms of customer vertical, customer focus.
Yeah, awesome. And so I know obviously you spent time at Polygon, Proofpoint, and of course now obviously stepped up into Lookout. Is it 4 years now? You've nearly been there.
Yeah, that's correct. Coming up on 4 years.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about Lookout and what's your mission?
Yeah, Lookout. We've been around about 12 years. We have our roots based in mobile endpoint security. So it's really where we got our start, protecting the mobile device. So you think the phone, the tablet, and even Chromebooks. And recently we've expanded that to the cloud security space. So it's very timely for a number of reasons. With the pandemic and everybody and people being forced to work from home that had the ability to work from home, it completely broke down the traditional if you think of the castle and moat setup in terms of networks, people working in an office, localized data centers, and then in conjunction with that, this big move to the cloud. So we have these scenarios now where people are working from anywhere, on any device, any network, and trying to access all the traditional work assets that they've wanted to access when they were actually in the office. So it's completely broken the model. These software-based cloud security tools are going to be very, very important as for any agency or company moving forward that's moving data to the cloud, and that's virtually everybody. Either they have moved data to the cloud, or they are in the process of moving it to the cloud. And then in addition to that, the U.S. federal government has put out a series of mandates over the last couple of years around zero trust architecture. They've got some very well-defined architecture documents, both within the federal civilian agencies as well as defense agencies, about how those architecture should be structured. And we find ourselves in a really good spot where we can support the mobile endpoint all the way up to protecting the user and the data in the cloud. And we've got some really unique differentiators in how we do that around protecting the data wherever the data goes, and protecting the user and the device. It's just this kind of notion of continuous conditional access. So it's a really exciting time for Lookout, and where we've expanded the company, and we've dramatically increased the size of the company to capitalize on this market, which is really just exploding.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it sounds a very exciting space, especially the move into the cloud security area as well. So that's fantastic. So I guess today is a really interesting topic for me, is around the federal and the public sector space. As I'm sure you know, and I definitely do know, that the federal, U.S. federal, pouring billions into cybersecurity and everything along those lines as well. So I guess, how does the federal markets differ from other markets, especially when you're working within a vendor?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny, if I go back to the early part of my career, the federal government was actually they were effectively leading in terms of adopting new technology. They even on the defense side, they were very much into what was new, what could take them, launch them forward and get them ahead in terms of IT and data protection and things like that. But over the years, and frankly, admittedly over the decades, we've seen that position kind of reverse itself, where because of the scale, the complexity, the number of people that are involved, the funding situation. So we've seen that situation flip, and the government tends to lag a little bit. So I think they have the benefit of kind of watching large commercial enterprise and watching the major initiatives that are occurring with, the Fortune 500, the Fortune 1000, looking at the vendors, assessing those technologies. But there's a couple other things that kind of play into that. One is, a lot of these large projects have become very centralized. So, you go back a couple of decades, things were very distributed. There were a lot of different decision makers at lower, more localized levels, but these projects have become so complex and standardized that they function at a very higher level within the government. So what that means is they're typically large, centrally funded programs, which means there's a large federal systems integrator involved. There's centralized funding. There's a lot of planning. There's large RFPs and awards, oftentimes a protest and delays. So you can kind of see the wheels of government and how they impact a lot of these projects. But the good news is these projects are typically very well designed. They're very well organized. So once they get going, and they get momentum, they tend to go on for years and years and years. I mean, the Navy's had a program that's morphed a couple of times. That's really, it's really over 20 years old now. It's changed SIs a couple of times, but at the root of it, it's had the same intent, which is to effectively outsource and provide IT infrastructure and security to the U.S. Navy. There are a lot of other programs that are like that. So the other problem that and I think it's good that the government has figured out how to do a lot of that outsourcing, because one of the challenges that they have is as our industry has evolved. We're all fortunate in this industry that the pay scale is quite high, but the government has a challenge, and they've got some static levels in terms of pay grade. So it's difficult for them to attract and retain talent in the areas of IT. So some of those people actually get to the top end of the pay scale very quickly. And then companies like Lookout and other IT, companies in the private sector will tend to hire a lot of those top talent out of the government, leaving them even in a more precarious position. So hence they are kind of tend to be more project managers, where they will create and initiate a project. They'll outsource it to a large, federal systems integrator, and then a lot of the talent lies there, and then lies with, in the vendor community as well. So we see that trend occurring too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. No, it's definitely an interesting topic, especially the talent side of it as well. Is how can you actually attract the best talent within any company, no matter if it's government or on the vendor side as well. So no, it's definitely interesting. So I guess I want to kind of switch it onto the vendor side. So obviously spending a lot of time in the federal and public sector space myself, and I know obviously you and I know each other for a few months now, but how can vendors really invest into the federal space? Because as you know, you really need a lot of investment when stepping into the arena. So what advice would you give to vendors looking to get into federal or looking to get into the public sector space?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been down that road a couple of times. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to have a strong stomach if you're entering the federal space for the first time. And as we were talking just a few moments before the podcast, when you put a plan together, it doesn't always go as planned, right? You have to have your end goal in mind, and then the path to success. There's a lot of twists and turns in those roads. But I would say that, for the most part, if a company at its kind of headquarters level decides, the CEO and executive branch of a private sector company wants to make an investment in federal, that most of the time they will find key individuals kind of in the Washington area, or people that just have a lot of experience in federal. So that team typically knows how to do it and what to do. And I would encourage the leaders that maybe don't know the public sector space as well to have patience, because I kind of sum it up as follows. I think virtually every company wants to do federal business. They don't necessarily understand what it takes to do federal business, nor do they have the patience for how long it takes to do federal business. So it could mean there's massive investments. If you're a software-based SaaS company, it's investing in getting security authorizations for your products through the FedRAMP process, because if it's not FedRamped, the government will largely not acquire it. They're not supposed to be able to acquire it. You might find a few outliers, but you're not going to build a strong business without your FedRamp authorization. That can cost, that can be a 7-figure investment for a company to be able to apply all those security controls to your existing SaaS solution that you use for your commercial clients. And should you be putting a second instance of your software platform into a gov cloud, from one of the big cloud providers, that's a big decision to be made as well. Investing in the federal systems integrator relationships, and then the other thing too is one of the things that I find has the highest failure rate for a lot of companies that want to get into the federal space is they put an incentive plan in place, or I should say that the incentive plan that's put in place for the field sales and marketing personnel is exactly the same as what they have for their commercial enterprise people. But the problem is, if you've never done any federal business, you're probably not going to take your first order for 18 to 24 months. So it's hard to keep a team around, when they're really, when they're not making the income that they desire, that they signed up for. So I would also encourage people to have flexibility and do what they need to do to invest in the people as well, to ensure that if they believe they have the right team, find a way to keep them there and show that you understand that this is going to take a while, and that, that kind of the we're all in this together mentality.
Yeah. And just touching on that last point a little bit there, how would you do that then? Stepping into a business, say for example, if you moved into a startup company, how would you incentivize the reps that are not going to get maybe any commission for the next 18 months?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've seen it done a couple of different ways. I've seen it done where people are effectively on an MBO plan, right? Where there's they're bonused based on certain milestones that they want to achieve, right? Maybe it's getting a customer that is willing to sponsor you for FedRAMP, because that's a big one. You can't really go into the FedRAMP process very easily without having a sponsor per se. So get a customer sponsor, get a couple customers to even trial it. Now they probably won't buy it, but to get them to trial it, doing some branding and awareness campaigns with inside, the public sector space. So creating some incentives where if you do this, we can provide you some level of compensation, and all those goals and objective obviously have to be things that you want to do, that are going to inch you closer and closer to building that business. I've also seen organizations do this successfully, where they don't really go out and hire what you would think of as typical salespeople or systems engineers that are in the field. They start out more with leaders or business development people, or people that have a lot of experience in the federal integrator community, and tend to build it that way. So it becomes almost like a kind of a skunk works project, where you're incubating this business unit inside of the company, but you're treating it completely different than you treat the rest of your organizations. And again, I've seen it go wrong more than I've seen it go right, where somebody wants federal or SLED business, and they hire a bunch of salespeople, and they give them the same quota, the same compensation plan, and set them off to go do it, and it tends to fail miserably. And then you'll cycle through a couple of generations of teams, which is unfortunate, and then until you finally get the momentum and get it right and build that business. But I think you can save yourself a lot of time and money and frustration if you look at this business investment a little bit differently, because it's a very unique vertical that requires extra expense, special consideration, different sets of skills and awareness.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's great advice, really great advice, especially for people venturing into the federal market for the first time. So no, really great advice, Tony.
And I'm sure you see that a lot in your role, correct? I mean, where you see folks in the public sector that, we see a lot of these resumes. People have been someplace for a year or 18 months, and there's nothing wrong with the candidate, but they were put in a position where it was almost impossible to be successful. And, for a lot of people, it just becomes a quality of life and frankly a cash flow issue, right? You need to be able to earn your income, and if the company is not creating an environment for you to be successful over the long term, then there's a lot of opportunity, as in this industry, and people will tend to move around.
Yeah. No, I see it as well, where the executive team actually put way too much pressure on the team as soon as they bring them through the door. I've had multiple calls with many people, especially within the federal and public sector space, where the senior leadership are kind of after 6 months expecting huge results, but they need to take more time and obviously take their investment a little bit more seriously, especially for the people, because it really upsets the individuals that come into a business expecting they're going to come in to grow something over a long term. Then they have to leave within 6 to 12 months, which does happen.
A former boss of mine used to have this line, and I borrow it and I use it a lot. It's when he and I would talk about what we do and our levels. Well, of course, we're running our individual businesses, but ultimately we're in the people business.
Yeah.
And if we can't create an environment that motivates people and allows them to be successful, that's really a failure of leadership. So these organizations that fail in the public sector space, most of the time it's not a failure of bringing the wrong people on board. It's a failure of leadership with the wrong expectations and the wrong plan, or frankly no plan. That's usually the bigger problem, right? As kind of said a few minutes ago, we're going to treat it just like large enterprise or small medium business, and we're going to go after it, and that's absolutely the wrong approach.
No, I completely understand and I completely agree. I think every business is in the people business, really, aren't they? And especially when there's real longevity in a certain sector like federal as well. So now I mean, that's one of the topics today. What we wanted to discuss, leadership. So I ask this question with everybody that comes on the podcast, and I speak to obviously hundreds of people a month around leadership. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to really grow and scale an organization within the federal business, and how do you really effectively do that as a leader?
Yeah, that's a good question. I appreciate the question too. I mean, I think a lot about this, and everybody has their own personality and their own style, and we all come from different backgrounds and different work experiences. But I have this philosophy, and I say this, when I interview people as well, whether they're going to be a direct report to me or they're just going to be somewhere in our organization, is that we all spend more waking hours with our work colleagues than we do our families and friends. And while all of us, everybody's got a boss, everybody knows who they report to, everybody knows what their role is, that's kind of understood. But why does it have to be tense, right? Why does it have to be all business? I mean, I think it needs to be a collaborative and fun environment. And, if we're going to spend all this time with one another, we should like each other. We should be able to get along. We should be able to have fun. I mean, I love this industry. I love this business. It's certainly got its highs and lows. You win the deal, you feel great. You lose the deal, you feel terrible. But that's kind of the excitement of, it's like athletics, right? At the end of the day, there's every Sunday with, if you're talking about American football or any sport, there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser, right? But you still get up and you want to participate in that every day. As I've gotten later into my career, I kind of feel like my brand in this area is creating a work environment where people feel safe, they feel comfortable being themselves, they get to work within their own style. We have a lot of fun. I like to get to know people on a personal level. I mean, I typically know the names of their kids and spouses after a certain period of time, and they know mine, because I think those are important elements, and I don't want to make it all business. Now somebody could probably accuse me of making it too personal or it's too friendly, but I grew up in a family that had some family businesses, and it was the employees were just an extension of the family, and I think if you kind of create those work environments, you're going to create a scenario where people stay around for a very long time. They're eventually going to stick around. They're going to make money. They're going to feel successful. They're going to feel valued. They know that I care and that the other managers care about them. And I think that's the best environment. Our industry is way too transient. This is not IBM in 1960 where people are going to work there for 30 years and retire and get a pension. It's not how our industry is. So if we're going to spend all this time working with folks like you to find the best and brightest talent out there, how do we keep them around? And it's creating that right culture in that environment. It's not just a compensation plan. It's not just whether or not we've got a great product. It's not whether the territory is spending a lot of money in our space. It's all those other softer items that are a little more difficult to measure. But it's and even now with COVID, and you and I are doing this call over video, right, as opposed to face, it's more isolating, and we have to try even harder to make sure that people care. I do step level meetings with my sales managers, sales reps. They're not direct reports to me, but once a month I have a one-on-one with them. I don't ask them about their forecast. I don't ask them about their any specific deals. We just talk about how things are going, where I can help, and frankly, half the call is around social things, just kind of seeing what they're doing, what they did in the summer, what kind of plans they have coming up. So just so that I don't get too far from them, but they know that that they're valued in the organization. I think those things are important, and you just have to make time for it. Again, it's back to being in the people business, and I think those are the most successful leaders. It's that kind of General Electric Jack Welch mentality, right? Which is, he was tough, he was effective, but he was a people guy, and he was well liked, he was well respected, which is just as important, if not more important, than being well liked. And people felt comfortable in that environment, and they were successful. People can be at their best when they're comfortable and they feel safe.
Yeah, even just that last point you mentioned there, people perform best when they feel valued, and especially when you was talking a little bit about obviously when you're working with the people, finding out their kind of home life and everything along those lines as well. If you don't do that side of it as well, and it's all just a compensation game, then people will just leave for more money as well. So it's a mixture of everything, and honestly, brilliant points there, Tony. And obviously it's maybe I might come work for you one day.
Hey, the way your podcasts are going, I'll come work for you. So congratulations on your success.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. No, well, Tony, there's just one more topic I want to discuss today, and it's just quickly about the federal US cyber security area. It'd just be great to hear your thoughts on where it's going to be in the next 2, 3, 4 year, 5 years.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with federal, kind of as we spoke a little bit ago, when they take on a project, it tends to take a little while for it to evolve and develop. So it's usually not that difficult to see where they're going to be in 2 to 5 years, because it's pretty much where they say they're going to be in 2 to 5 years, right? Because they've laid out, and case in point, they about 18 months ago or so, they laid out these zero trust initiatives. And there are funding initiatives and completion dates in the 2024 to 2025 time period. So as we sit late into 2022, we already know where they're supposed to be by 2025. So and what the plan is. So I think, but more specifically, what that means is you're going to see move to the cloud, right? There are still a lot of government data centers. There's still a lot of private applications sitting behind firewalls that are like more network based. But I think you're going to see a lot of this stuff move to the cloud. You're going to see a continued, or I should say, even an expansion of the mobile workforce. The government was very much against teleworking. When the pandemic hit, they were forced to adopt that, like the rest of us. They scrambled from a technology perspective to put enough things into place where people could effectively do their jobs and do their jobs securely. That's proven to be a difficult task. But we even see government agencies selling real estate and shuttering their office space and moving to hoteling cubicles and offices. And encouraging people to work from home. So this is and actually the current presidential administration versus the prior one is much more in favor of telework. And part of it is probably because there was kind of midstream in the pandemic, and they began to see the telework actually working well, and people getting to a point where they're effective and getting a lot of work done, very, very high productivity. But so in this move to the cloud, and then being able to secure the data wherever the data resides, creating an environment where these solutions are highly effective and collaborative, where if I share data with you, it protects private data that maybe shouldn't have been shared. It flags things. It watches our behavior, how we function. All those things, I think, there are tools that exist today. It's going to take the government a little bit of time before they can wrap their arms around and begin utilizing all those tools. But again, move to the cloud and telework are going to drive so much of this. And this being able to any user, any device, any network, anywhere, anytime mentality, where the network perimeter is gone. It's all software based. It's all cloud based. and this, this notion of access through hardware and network perimeters is completely gone.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it's very insightful, and I'll be staying close to the public sector space as well. I love it. But Tony, honestly, thank you so much for today. We've gone through a lot of really important topics, and yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and hopefully we'll do one in the future as well.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thanks for having me, and again, congratulations for all your success, and best of luck. I will continue watching all of these podcasts as they roll out.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elliot.
Thank you, Tony. Bye bye.
All right. Be well. Bye.